right. Let's talk about the La Rosa educational course, shall we? I feel like I love these oversized shirts. I did stain this one, but I still wear it. I don't care. But I think it's just too big. I feel like it's kind of gotta be like rolled up a little bit. Anyway, I feel like those people like put the cigarettes in there, roll it up. Okay, let's get to it. This is not gonna be too long. I like the idea of doing this where I talk it out kind of candidly, and then I'll take the transcription from this and just make that the Substack post. And that's just that's the life of having to post on every platform when you're building something like this educational course. So I have some notes in terms of talking points I wanted to touch on. I'll do that, and then we'll be done because the air conditioning is off. I'm already sweating, and so hopefully, ignore this. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to do this. So the first thing, what was this and why was it important? I thought this would be a great way to just get students involved with my connections that I have because I'm connected to La Rosa. I had just shot there for Anne, formerly Shelby Athagia. It was kind of her like last show before the name change, which was great. And I was so glad that I could archive that moment for her. And that kind of got me closer to some of the people at La Rosa. And so when this came up, I was like, of course, like let's do it at La Rosa. It's an incredible building. The team is amazing. And they would say, yes, it's the summer. Of course, there's a lot of things that will go into that. We'll talk about that with location stuff in a second. But otherwise, there's a very easy yes from them. And I was feel very lucky that they were just like, come do it, of course. But the reason why I wanted to do something at La Rosa is the most important thing in my opinion, and this is what we're doing with the educational course and the program, is we are trying to find ways to help upcoming students and artists and creators to find their footing in this ever-changing media landscape. The word that I have been using since I was straight out of college is new media, and it's not so new anymore. They've been saying that for many years now, but it's still classified as new media because there still is traditional media. And so what we're trying to do, and me specifically with this course, the SoAZFilm Academy, is to help teach people what you might need to know for what's coming next. And a lot of that, of course, is social media, is new media, is YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack. It's creating for all these different platforms now where you used to just be able to just like pull out a camera and make a commercial for television. That hasn't been a thing for a very long time. But I saw that when I was young is like people still wanted commercials. And so we are very far from that now. But what I loved about this opportunity is from what I've seen in the industry specifically is live event is still huge. And that's something that will seemingly be AI proof going forward, entering into this next stage, whatever this next stage is. So teaching people how to interact with live events, how to set them up, how to, what the etiquette of it, all of it is, and actually shooting a live event. In this case, it was Janine, ADHDJ9, I believe is her DJ name. I had to say that so many times on the day, but that was a while ago. And yeah, it's shooting live events is something that is still very important in our industry, and it's in high demand. So it's a great way to keep people engaged. As a lot of things are kind of being like pushed aside with AI and just all this like generative stuff. I keep seeing more and more of it daily, and it's very interesting to figure out where it's going to go next. So that's that. That's why we did it at La Rosa specifically. Yes. So another part of this was, just from my end of all of this is a lot of it was collecting gear with a very low budget, basically a no budget. I didn't want to spend too much of my own money on this. I will say we did get grant funding from the Arts Foundation for Southern Arizona. I think that's the full name that they use. I will correct it if it's not. But Yeah, so I just threw a few $100s at this, a little more than that, to get Nick Watts, who's a very experienced cinematographer. He knew what he was doing. I knew I needed one person other than myself to be on this set actually shooting it that had done it before. And that was Nick Watts, and he did an incredible job. I gave him my Easy Rig, my C300, documentary kit with the zoom on it, all this kind of stuff, and so yeah, he did an incredible job, basically being this floater, like full time, just like running around the entire venue, getting the DJ, but also getting the space. That was kind of the concept as well, as like show off this beautiful space that La Rosa is. And he did great with that. And so that was that. That was all of my gear. I had some lighting I brought to have a bunch of stands and all this, like kind of like a hodgepodge of just like weird gear that I've collected in the last 15 years of my life. And then the reason I did throw some money at Nick Watts, which I think is very important to do, even with projects like this, is because he brought his own camera as well as another one that we could use. He brought some more lighting. And this is just like, now that I'm getting older, I'm like, okay, I can't just expect people to show up, one, with their own time for free and their own gear for free. And like, this guy was holding a 11-pound camera for 2 hours or whatever. And like, it's stuff like that, money is important, whether it's a no budget or not. Like, I don't think it's ever really no budget once you get to a certain age. Unless you're in a very specific position. But for me, it's like if you're making a lot of money, then I think you are in a position to be like, oh, let's just go have some fun. Like, I've seen people that do that, but for everyone else that doesn't make a lot of money, this is just the game we're playing. So collecting gear was really important, and that again just comes with knowing so many people in the community. I asked Christian Meza as well for a few things, and he was very open to that. We're actually doing the next educational course at Brick Box Brewery. I knew I was going to mess that up. I can't say, every single time I try it, I can't say it. Brick Box Brewery. And so Triple B, good name. But yeah, we're doing one at the end of August, which I'm very excited for. This is to launch like the main program that, the educational program that I'm going to lead for the next 6 months. And Christian was like, hey, just, he couldn't give me too much because of the scheduling issue, but it was July 4th that we shot this. So I felt bad enough for dragging everyone out there on that day. But ultimately, yeah, he gave us some stuff, and he's going to give us much more in kind. I also gave him a little bit of money, but in terms of like what the rental would be for all of this stuff, it's considerably no money when you really put it on paper. So Christian Meza, a great connection as well. These are people that just like I work with, I do things for, they do things with me. Like that's the nature, especially in Tucson, of making creative projects. What else do I have on here? Oh yeah, so the gear to finish out the gear, we actually had a ton of cameras that people brought from everywhere. The Southern Arizona Film Society brought a camera or two. That was like a Fuji. We had, which I love the Fuji. It's like the XT3 or 4 or whatever that model is. It's very much a stills camera, but the sensor is so good that the video looks great. I love using those cameras. It has the manual dials, like old film cameras that I enjoy using. So it was that. We had a Blackmagic Pocket as kind of a wide from behind the DJ, which looked great, showing the entire space. We had Nick Watts C500. We had my C300 flying around. Then we had a Sony, which was, I think, also from Nick. A Sony C200 that I have, kind of just laying around at this point that I don't use professionally anymore. Yeah, we had a ton of angles, and that was so cool to be able to cut in. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but in terms of gear, that's about it. All I had to do was, and again, this is from experience, I knew that like having to record out of a DJ mixer is a certain situation. especially when they're playing live and they're going out to speakers. So a lot of the time you're going to run out of audio out, just from my experience. And so I was able to have that conversation with Janine, and we figured that out. And ultimately, it was just easier to run out of the speaker, because her mixer doesn't have too many outputs on it. It's just like, it's not one of the big, like, the Pioneer mixer. It's like an all-in-one. So the RCAs, and what else? Anyways, it was taken up. And so as a safety, what I knew I could do is I just ran the audio out of the speaker, because that's fine in terms of just like into a Zoom recorder. And then I knew that she would be able to, in her all-in-one, which is great, record the mix into Rekordbox. Which is great about using those kind of systems, is like when your computer's attached to this thing, you can record the set, all that kind of stuff, and it's very easy to get to. There was a really funny moment where we actually had to restart the entire shoot, basically, because, and I'm so glad I had this feeling. Obviously in the beginning of this, a lot of things are happening. We're rolling 5 cameras. We've got audio going. She's like trying to make sure that she's on point, and of course, like, I introduce her, I do a little interview with her, and I've been here before, especially with interviews, is like it takes you kind of out of your headspace, that like the performing headspace. And so after the interview, she gets into the set, all is well, and I was like, a minute or two later, I was like, there's a really good chance she didn't press record on that mixer. And so I was like, I don't want to have just one track. I want to have at least a backup track. And so I remember I just came on stage, and this was like a boiler room, like inspired, or like they called it like Circle during the pandemic. There's all that, like, the Circle videos of DJs and different really cool environments. And that was my inspiration for this. And so, of course, yeah, you always see, kind of the admin people going up to the DJ every once in a while, and before and after the interview. And so I knew I could go up and be in frame, and it was no big deal. And I remember going up to her, I was like, hey, so like you press record, right? And she was like, no, I didn't. And I was like, okay, we're fine. We're just going to start this whole thing over. And so that was kind of funny. We kept all the cameras rolling, but we just did a whole nother take, basically. And that was great, because the reason that was a good thing, that it happened that way, was ultimately I ended up using her track for the full 2-hour video. I used that track from the all-in-one mixer, Rekordbox, that program, rather than the one on the speaker, because obviously, going out to a speaker, that's a whole different level in terms of audio levels. So it was good to just, in that situation, I knew I could stop it in case something was going wrong, and it's no big deal, because like we're running the show. It wasn't, it was only a few minutes into the set, and so I was like, this is not a big deal. Obviously, if it were live, that you couldn't do that. And so we're very lucky that it wasn't live, basically. So yeah, another big thing about this was the location scout, and this is where a lot of things shifted. What's interesting is Janine and I chose to do it on July 4th for a reason. It just seemed like the easiest with her schedule, my schedule, everyone else's schedule around me, knowing that we'd do it during the day, so we wouldn't take up, anyone's night, and they'd be able to celebrate, and it wouldn't be busy, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of just landed on that day for one reason or another. And I think it was 3 days prior, I was able to go for almost a couple hours and scout the location. And that was nice, because this is a huge part of this, in terms of, we're running this educational course where we're showing people how to record a live show and how to set up all this gear and what goes into it, all this kind of stuff. But of course, there's a before and after to every shoot. And that's what we're getting into later with the later courses. But that's also the goal with these videos and the Substack posts and all this kind of stuff, is to be able to explain for each specific shoot what went into it that you might have not seen. And so for this, it was a location scout, which was very important, because I had never shot there alone in terms of like during the day. I don't know how their system works. I don't know where the power is. When I was there for that shoot, which was at night for Shelby/Ann's DJ set. It was a big show. It was this whole thing. I didn't have to power anything. It was just me and the camera for a couple hours, and then I was done. And this is like a ton of cameras, figuring out the audio of the space, flying a drone. We flew a drone during that. Well, I flew the drone during this, which is why I had Nick operate as well, as I wanted to be able to remove myself from full-time operating, kind of direct the show, be able to help the students along the way, and then fly the drone. Kind of just be a director more so. And so it was great that we had this location scout because one, we realized, Janine and I at the same time, basically on the same day, realized that they were setting up for an event a day before the day that we were going to shoot and the day after. It was like all this World Cup stuff, which again, I couldn't know that they were having events there. She found out, kind of later in the game. And so they were covering all of the windows. And this is a cathedral. And all of the cathedral windows were covered. And I was like, no. Like, it's like that. The whole idea is the space, like it looking like a cathedral. And so that's something we had to talk about and figure out with her and the other admin people. And that's huge. If I didn't do the scout and showed up on the day, it could have been a massive issue. And there's so many things that she has to think about and people in her position have to think about. And she either could have just forgotten about it or she might have mentioned it and then nothing could have been done. But because I was there, I was able to make it a very big point that like these have to be uncovered when we do this shoot. The one thing that was a bummer was the huge, which is like their logo, the big circle, which is at the front of the cathedral, facing the main street. It's like you see it when you show up to this place. And they covered that, of course, for the games, for the screening of the games. And they couldn't take that off. That was too much effort because what they were doing is they were going to put all the other covers back up onto the windows, which is cool that they did that. But their main logo, like the cathedral thing, was covered. And so I couldn't feature that as much as I wanted to, which is a bummer. I did plan on potentially photoshopping their logo onto that if I could see it from behind her, like, because, obviously it was all the way down the cathedral at the front. She's all the way in the back on the stage. So if I saw it behind her, I would have done that. But the shot that we ultimately set up from behind her didn't show that. And it was so far away because the behind her shot was such a wide shot. It was like you couldn't even tell it was covered because it was so out of focus. So that was a huge thing with the location scout. Also the power, although this is a venue, there was so much to think about with power because they already have so many things plugged in. And the thing with this shoot was, and again, we figured this out basically during the location scout, is the venue wasn't going to assist us for any kind of lighting or sound. And we were on our own. And so that's also why I had to source so many pieces of gear, is because I thought in my head that we were going to be able to use the moving lights and all these, the up lights that they have, stanchion stuff, all that kind of stuff. But they couldn't because they were too busy with all these events around that day, before and after as well. And so that put me in a new position. Basically, within a day, I had to be like, I have to find all this new gear and basically work around the fact that like we're not going to have the support of the tech team at a cathedral music venue. And so again, luckily, I have a lot of experience with music venues and shooting music, but that was tough. That was a really tough thing to adjust to within a day. And Christian was helpful. Christian Meza, again, with adding more gear to that. And ultimately, yeah, it was a lot of prep, basically the morning of, as I'm loading in, we're setting up, explaining all the gear to the students, but like also finding like where to do things, how to do things, keep it out of the way, keep it out of shots, all that kind of stuff. And that's a huge thing that you also sometimes can do on location scouts, but sometimes that's just production in general, that you're just dealing with that situation on the day. So that was a big one. And then lastly, of course, was food, where we could bring it, where it could be, where we could store things, gear and personal stuff that would be out of the way. Because This shoot is just, it's wide open. So basically what I wanted to do was just put the cameras on one side so you can fly and see on the other side completely with nothing. Every once in a while you'd see a camera, that's no big deal, but they were hiding kind of like the pillars, like the side hallway of the cathedral. And that was the goal, is to just keep it as open as possible. And I didn't want you to see all the tech during the actual shots, especially with the drone. And so that was kind of cool, is like we did a really good job of setting this up so you could barely tell that there were 5 cameras and a drone at any one given time, at any given angle. So again, that was the location scout as well, was seeing where I could potentially, using the camera finder app, which there are so many of those. I explained this to the students on the day, is, I have one from 10 years ago or more that I got. I think it's just like literally it's out. The version is gone. Like they don't update it anymore, but it's the one I bought, so I use it. But yeah, I love that the camera viewfinder, you can choose the lenses. I was able to go all around, basically figure out where I'd put the cameras and how, and then ultimately it was just like, how do we run power to them? So that was that. I know that's a little more gear, but that, again, that goes into the location scout. If you're in a position like me where like I'm kind of just doing almost everything that needs to be done, again, so we don't have to pay people with the budget we don't have, and then, but also because in my, like I mentioned before, my situation is I don't like to make people do too many things for free. And so there is that like, okay, I want to make sure that like I can do all this stuff. It's not a big deal for me. I can stay organized. This way I'm not putting too much of a burden on someone else when there's no budget to give them. So that's the nature of the beast, and it will continue to be this way going forward. As I mean, every film and commercial set I've been on recently, like all the roles are shrinking down into 2 or 3 roles for one person, or they're getting rid of roles. It's just the way things are going. It's the nature of production, and unless you are the person running it, you can't decide whether that happens or not. So that's the way it goes. The drone issue, yes. So that is something that I got to see during the location scout, and which was huge because it prepared me for a problem that we would have on the day, but I knew it was going to be a problem and I could adjust for it. And what the problem was is this specific drone that I have, it's a lower model one. It's smaller. It's easier to fly. But it was having tons of problems in the venue. And I think it was because of all like these remote things that they have, all these, there's tons of wireless DMX, kind of lighting system things that they have going on in venues like this. And I could tell that like there was a ton of interference with the drone. It was freaking out. It was like shoving itself left and right. It wouldn't go too high sometimes because it couldn't get the satellite. This smaller one, I don't think has sensors for above, so it doesn't know when it's going to hit something. So when it can't read a satellite, it'll only go so high. Anyway, there were so many issues with this drone, and I'm really glad I got to see that on the location scout day to prepare myself for this isn't going to be an easy time with the drone. So I flew it less. I flew it when I could pay complete attention to it until the end, which is very funny, which I knew it's funny when I'm interviewing Janine, and the drone is like an angle that I wanted to have at the end. And it was freaking out. And so I would literally have to be like, I was like talking to her and I have to be like flying it because it was trying to hit a wall or something. And we can't not speak about this. I'm just flying this drone. I love that I'm flying this drone while we're talking. But otherwise, it was just like a very like stay super focused on this drone and like adjust to it, freaking out. So that was huge. Again, like if that happened on the day, that just adds even more stress to the situation that there doesn't need to be. But yes, okay. So a huge thing was battery and media for all of these, the hodgepodge, I keep calling it, of gear, the camera systems that we have. So this one now, like which I gave Nick, I primarily record to the external monitor. I never record internal with this camera because I refuse to buy those cards that are extremely expensive. So it sends a great signal out. Everything is fine. But again, that's one way. The C200 was recording internal because that's just the way it had to be for that camera. that camera specifically, which is why I don't use it anymore, is so hard to get a good file out of it unless it's internal RAW. Everything else is this really like 8-bit whatever. And so it was, that's why that camera was basically like D or E angle, where it's like, this image isn't going to look good. We're going to record to the SD cards. That's all we had. And so, we're not trying to have 2 terabytes of footage out of one camera. So just recorded these, as a proxy image, basically a really low 8-bit quality file. Like the color is, you could tell between, like when you come to this camera angle, you can tell that it's just like a bit more washed out. The colors aren't as saturated. It's just like less contrast. It's just not as beefy of an image as you're getting out of a 10 or a 12-bit image like this one does. And so we knew that we were going to put that aside. The issue we ran into with that, though, was really interestingly, that camera does great with batteries. I've always known the C200 does. The C300, a little worse. Obviously, it's a little more power hungry. They take the same batteries. But we only had to switch that battery once, I believe. But the cards were the issue. Because what we had left over for SD cards were just 2 64 gigabyte cards. And what happened was we only had one of them in the card slot. And so it wouldn't read the second one. There was just all these, again, there's all these problems when you're just working with gear that you just have laying around. And ultimately, that camera had to cut. I believe the Fuji had to cut. A few cameras had to cut, to deal with like switching media or a battery, like a power problem. The C500, which was Nick's camera that he brought, that was eating up batteries. That went through 3 batteries, which I was not prepared for. I had no idea the C500 ate up that much power, even more than the C300. So I was not prepared for that again. And so on the day, I'm just like, organizing batteries. We're charging batteries as the shoot's going on, but I just have like most of the batteries at the C500. But that media was easier because, again, the C500 doesn't have the media recording problems as the C200 does. So the C500, you can just record internally. It looks fine. It's a great image. And so between the C300, the C500 was the next best looking angle of Janine. And then you had the Fuji, which was above, which is fine. That's just a great like alternative angle to, like, you can see the decks and what she's doing from above every once in a while. The behind Janine shot was incredible because you can see this beautiful cathedral. That was the point of that shot. And again, the nice thing about the Pocket is you can record ProRes LT, so it's a very small file, but still a very good. I think it's 12-bit from what I remember. I think the Blackmagic Pocket, which is why everyone used to love that, is a 12-bit LT. Incredible. And so that matches very well with the Canon cameras because it's such a high quality file. And then again, the Sony was just like this huge wide from, to see the entire cathedral and Janine at the very end of it DJing. That's an MP4 file. Like Sony is this, I knew that was like going to be the most like digital looking one out of all of them. And so I just threw that as the wide and that did just fine. That was running on a DTAP or like a gold mount battery. So that could last for literally probably 18 hours, which is the beauty of running those kind of batteries. So the gear was fine. The media was a bit of an issue. The power was a huge issue. And that would bring me into talking about the edit a little bit. And that's a huge part of this, again, that you can think about this stuff on the day. And I was kind of prepared for this. I remember specifically Francisco from the nonprofit at the end being like, oh, don't you need to line up the audio with like it? And I was like, no, dude, like it's too late for that. And because I knew during the shoot that all these different cameras had been cutting for one reason or another. And so they hadn't recorded the whole time, which again, there's no reason to line up audio when they hadn't been recording all of them at the same time for the entire time. So that brings me to the really interesting part of editing this, which again, these students can't really see, which is why I'm talking about it, is multicam, which again, we have 5 cameras and a drone. Multicam is very easy in DaVinci. And this is something you can YouTube, and it's literally a click of a button. The issue you have with DaVinci, though, is before you can multicam something, it needs to know that every file is lined up correctly with the files below it. So every camera has to be at the exact moment in time, of course, for it to be able to multicam, so you can cut to any single clip at that moment in time, and they're at the same place. The issue is, again, these cameras were cutting. Even Nick's was cutting because he was having some issues with the monitor or something. Again, you never know what's going to happen on the day with this stuff. So what was going on was in DaVinci, I had to manually line up like 20 clips or whatever it was, however many of these things, that had to cut. I had to manually line those up first myself, and then I was able to, with the click of a button, then go make this timeline a multicam timeline. And then from there, it's literally just like a video game. You're just like, boop, 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 boop. You're just clicking it. You're just getting ready for the next shot. And like, you get into a flow where you're like editing to the beat. And I love multicam editing. And so it becomes very easy after that. The only other thing to mention, which is mentionable in post, is once I kind of colored the clips the way I wanted to, kind of matched them the best way I wanted to. Depending on what system you have, this is a 2-hour, 5-clip, basically 6-clip timeline. And if you don't have a very powerful computer, you're in trouble for the export. And even if you want to go all the way down to like 1080 web, like something for H.264 YouTube, whatever, the smallest compression you can for web, or you can go all the way to ProRes, 422, just make it the beefiest kind of file, like almost no compression. Regardless of which one you want to do, you're in trouble if you don't have a very, very good computer. And I don't have a good computer like that. I have 2 different Macs. But at the time, the M2 Mac that I have, which is a decent MacBook Pro, that's good for like editing and exporting. It's better because it has internal fans, and this way it doesn't throttle. That's the issue with the MacBook Airs that you'll find is when you're trying to export out of a video editor like DaVinci, very GPU heavy, is it can't cool itself down. And so because of that, I can hear the fans going on the camera right now. If it can't cool itself down, then it's going to throttle everything. The speed, it's going to be more power hungry. All this, it just starts to go down in value in terms of what are you getting out of an export. And so when I was on my MacBook Air, basically putting this aside to export this huge 2-hour file, I made it ProRes first because that's actually quicker than trying to make it compress it all the way down to H.264. So when I did that, it said it was going to take 18 hours. And ultimately, it took 16. And so you have to be very prepared if you're doing like a very media-heavy project like this. There was a word I wanted to say, but I can't remember it. It's getting really hot in here. But yeah, when you're doing a project like this, you have to know how you're going to do things in post. And that's the point is like, although we're doing things on set, there's everything before and after is also being thought of on the day if you're doing it right. And so that's a great way to think about this kind of stuff is how am I going to edit it with what, how am I going to export this? How long is that going to take? And how is it going to affect my life when I'm trying to wait 16 hours to export a file? Let me see if there's more to talk about because I have a hilarious thing to talk about this. Yes. Okay. So finally, my leg is asleep. Finally, the issue, and this is so funny because I've dealt with this a little bit on YouTube, is YouTube is very good at copyright monitoring and infringement and all this kind of stuff. And there's this game you're able to play with YouTube where it's like, if you're not making money, you're not monetizing, there's a really good chance that you'll be able to still include music, especially if you're a DJ. Because could you imagine if every DJ just couldn't play songs because they're being blocked by YouTube? So most people can work around this, whether you can ask them to review it, where obviously the YouTube algorithm will block it automatically. It'll find the songs automatically, and it'll be like, okay, this is copywritten by this person, and they have it in their whatever contract online that like people can't use it. What's cool is like these labels and people that own music, they're able to say to YouTube, people can use my music, people can't, or they can reach out to us and we'll let them know. And so that's what's cool about YouTube is there's a review process where like you can say, hey, please, whatever label that this song is from, I'm not making money from this. This was an educational course. Can you please let us use this music? But what's interesting is, it's up to them. It's at their discretion. So we did this with Janine. I exported this and I uploaded it to YouTube, and every song was blocked. It was just like, no, you can't use this. And I was like, here we go. But what was different than other situations I've been in is these were most likely a bit like better known songs in like, the house and techno genre or whatever the genres were of these songs. And because of that, it was an automatic no from all the labels. I think only 2 people responded to us after this big review process on YouTube. And they were like, okay, that's fine. You can use it. But it didn't matter because the other 30 or 40 songs that she played were all blocked, and all the labels were like, no, you can't use this. So that was a huge thing to think and to think about. But to remind Janine, because she's a newer DJ, is DJs have to play this game, especially with the internet, where a lot of the times if they want to play a set, what they'll do is they'll upload their music to a place like YouTube first to see if those songs get blocked. And then they have to make a decision, do I want to continue playing these songs in the set knowing that it'll get blocked? Or do I change the song to one that won't? And that's a whole different conversation to have in terms of creativity and having to change your creativity and your artistic choices for platforms. That's, again, just the way it goes. Back in the day, you used to be able to scream fair use. You can't scream fair use anymore. It's just not the way it goes. We'll try this leg. So that was a huge part of this. And because of that, this is not on the internet. Like, I took clips of it, of course, and I put it on the Instagram, which again is fair use, free to go. And it's just funny how you play that game with these different platforms. Like, I could technically put all of the clips on Instagram, maybe even potentially YouTube Shorts, make the full 2 hours out of just small clips, and maybe that would be fine. But you can't put the full 2 hours. So again, it's just this thing you're doing, and you have to know going into it that this is going to happen. Good for us that this was an educational course. This is a very educational moment to consider. But if you were doing this, if you were getting paid to do this, this would be a very, very hard conversation to have with the DJ, where you're like, sorry, we can't put this on the internet because like it got blocked. And although it's more for them to know about this, it's also kind of your fault because you kind of need to know about this stuff since you're delivering for the web. So this is a huge thing to think about in your projects is, where is it going? Is it allowed to go there? Do I have the legal ability to put it somewhere? If not, then you have to rethink a lot of things about the shoot. So that's pretty much everything. I got through all my notes. This was so much fun. And I like that in between, because I'm doing 6 big courses over the next 6 months. But before, during, and after, I'm going to keep doing stuff like this as the opportunities come up. And that's why I'm so excited to announce that our next course, which I teased this already, but our next course is going to be at Brick Box Brewery. I nailed it that time. And we are going to be spotlighting Jim, the owner operator of Brick Box, also known as Runt. He is in Jivin Scientists. Jivin Scientist. I think it's an S because there's 2. Or there's more than 2. But anyways, so he is in this really well-known hip hop R&B, like kind of like, are they a band? I should know way more about this, but he is in this group, and he has always been so supportive, and he's just like a Tucson guy through and through, and he's done such a great job of bringing music to his space in Tucson and bringing events and just being so accommodating to everyone downtown specifically. And recently the building owner put it up for sale or for lease, whichever one it is. And that means that there is a imaginary clock that's ticking right now, which If they don't find a way to stay in the space, then like the owner is going to kick them out. And so that'll be the end of Brick Box Brewery downtown. And that's just the way it goes, right? And that's what I found Tucson to be, is like such a temporary town. And Brick Box has done great. It's been around for years. I remember I did a screening for my documentary there in 2021. So it's been around for a while. I think it was called something else though. That's what's kind of cool is Jim took it over. Then he changed it to Brick Box. That was probably just a few years ago. But either way, this is such a special space, and Jim is such a special person, that we're gonna interview him. We're gonna spotlight him. We're gonna just like bring attention to this place. Hopefully, that he gets to keep. But if not, then it'll be a great archive of the space. So that is next. That's going to be 2 days of educational course production, new media stuff, and I'm very excited for that. So we'll see how this transcription works. I hope DaVinci loves this, and it can just go text to Substack really quickly, but if not, we'll see. I will be back after the Brickbox production course, and we'll see what I have to say then.